It's time to be enlightened. It's time to be inspired. It's time for Rhythm and Word. The Raw Music Radio Show begins now.
Hello, family. It is time to get down to business. You are listening to Rhythm and Word Raw Music Radio, where ink meets beat. I'm your girl, Trisha Alicia.
And I'm Diallo, and we're excited about being back for another week.
Yes, indeed. How are you, Diallo?
I am blessed. Wish I was in the city with you all, but I'm kind of enjoying this phone liaison kind of thing.
I'm surprised you get reception in the Himalayas.
Well, you know what?
Fiji.
Anything I can do to vicariously be in the studio for Raw Music Radio and to share the mic with Trisha Alicia, I'm willing to do it.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your illustrious nation hopping to.
We won't call it illustrious, but we've been busy. God's been blessing, and I'm just excited that we have an exciting guest today, and she's really into ministry, and she's very progressive. So I couldn't miss this show.
Couldn't miss it for the world. I wouldn't miss it for the world either. Now, we have talked a little bit about leaking out a fantasy cipher of the week. We didn't do it last week. We got to put it up there this week. Kind of got it in just in the nick of time for this show. So do you have a fantasy top five spoken word fantasy cipher, Diallo?
You know, that's a tough question for me because I think I've shared before on there. I know I've told you that, God threw me in the spoken word. I'm not like an active, engaged listener unless I'm just pulled in by somebody. But if I just had to pull some people in, I'm kind of like, I think she's going to talk about, I'm more like a page person. So there are people whose poetry I really like Claude McKay, Langston Hughes,
absolutely,
Lord Byron, spoken word artists today. There's some great people, but I'm really like more into poets who I've read.
Gotcha.
There's some poets from back in the day. What about you? Since you threw it out there, you got to give us your fantasy site.
Dun, 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 dun. It's time for us to go to a break.
Oh.
I'm serious. It really is time for us to go to a break, but I happen to be saved by the bell of some awesome spoken word music that is about to hit your ear right now. Keep it locked on Raw Music Radio.
Welcome back to more Raw Music Radio. I'm Diallo.
Trisha Alicia.
And we are back in the studio. We were talking about Fantasy Top 5.
Fantasy Top 5.
Who are your Fantasy 5?
All right. So before I actually got into spoken word, similar to you, I did a lot of reading. And so I never really thought about spoken word and the dynamicness of it all until I got to college. And it started with my grandmother. So I would have to throw my grandmother. And I mean, she's the type of person where she never meets a stranger. So I really think that, had spoken word been around when she was really, really actively writing poetry, she would be commanding somebody's stage somewhere. Yeah, man. Because oh, man. I love the way she just describes stuff. So I would definitely say my grandmother. I like Nikki Giovanni's stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
I also really, really, really. I mean, there's just a couple people that people have never heard of, but those are the two big names that I'll throw out there. And then my niece is a spoken word artist, and I absolutely love her style and her flow. And it's cool to watch somebody begin the process and just to see how explosive and dynamic and all the ways and shapes that it can take. And so I definitely have to have big shout outs to my niece on how she's crafting her pen, for lack of a better term.
Wow.
Yeah.
You got a family of artists. That's 3.
Nah, the other 2. Listen,
you go ahead and say it.
No, actually I was gonna put you on my list. I was gonna put you on my list twice.
Okay, see, you know what? Well, today, our guest is Shaunte Caraballo. And I'm excited about her because when people hear her stuff, I think she's going to be in a lot of people's fantasy cipher. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she's talking about real issues, real things that people go through, and things that we experience. And so I think that's what makes the poetry. And so Shaunte is bringing it like that. So I'm excited about her being here.
And it's really cool because when you talk to her, she may not get into it, but in talking with her, I know that she's lived in several different places in several different states as a result of her family background. And it's really cool because I think she fuses all of that together into ministry. I know that she has a very active ministry with single women, and she also does ministry to women who work in the sex industry. And so when you kind of put all that together along with working with people who are at a stage of transition. She works at a university, and seeing that she has lived in a lot of different places, that relatability just comes all the way through in her spoken word.
Yeah. So it's going to be a dynamic interview. So we definitely want you to stay tuned, because Shaunte Caraballo's got some great things to say, and hopefully some insight for people who are looking to be better artists or want to be spoken word artists.
Yes, and yes. So we have a piece right now coming up by Dre the Poet, and it is called Say a Little Prayer. Keep it locked on Rhythm and Word Raw Music Radio.
And we're back in the studio with Raw Music Radio. In the studio today, we have none other than Shaunte Caraballo. Shaunte, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Blessed. Glad you could join us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Well, you know what we like to do with a lot of our guests is just kind of get a backdrop, how they started writing and things of that nature. So if you don't mind, how long have you been doing spoken word, and how did you get started?
Oh, I've been doing spoken word since like 2004. And I know that doesn't seem like a very long time for most people, but I had always been writing, and I had a friend who was doing a poetry slam. He was doing a competition, and I thought, I was like, oh, I want to, maybe I'll think about doing it. I don't know. I'm not sure. And one of my friends actually entered me without me knowing.
Surprise.
Wow.
Surprise, right? So I had to do something. So I pulled out a few pieces, and to my surprise, I made it all the way to finals and took second place.
Wow.
So,
Like the first time.
The first time.
So what was your piece about? Or what were the pieces that you spit that night?
I had a piece about my favorite spoken word artist. Her name is Maida Del Valle.
Okay.
And I had written a piece about her. It's called Crush. And so I did that piece. I think I actually did that one second.
Okay.
And my first piece was called Far Above Rubies. And that's the piece that's been published. And I'm always asked, like I get calls from churches. They'll be like, hey, I saw your piece at a women's conference you went to, or I read it in this book. Can you come do it at our church? So that was my second piece, Far Above Rubies. And my last piece, wow, what was that? I think it was some crazy piece I've never done since then. Something I wrote, like angry about how men approach me at the mall. Or something
Okay. So you had one piece shouting out the women, one piece in dedication to a mentor of sorts.
Yeah.
And then one kind of just, let me tell you why I'm mad.
Right. And it was funny because I really didn't understand the strategy of like slams.
Right.
Because I threw out my best piece first.
Right.
Because I didn't think I was going to make it to round 2.
Right.
So I just threw out what I thought was the best.
Exactly.
So when I made it to round 3, it was not the best poem. So I only got second.
It's your first time.
Right. I know. So
yeah.
It was cool, though. It was great. And
this is in Cali, or where were you when you did this?
Yeah, it was in Cali. It was actually my first year in grad school.
Okay.
And in Long Beach, California. And it was a crazy night. It was a crazy night.
Wow.
Now, we talked about how you have an acting background. So did that come into how you were able to be so effective in, I guess, that initial spoken word, and then I guess help our listeners understand a little bit more about how that's played out and how you come across on the stage?
Yeah. I try to tell people that I think there's 2 types of spoken word artists.
Okay.
There are people who are poets, and they write beautifully, and then they get up and deliver the work that they wrote.
Okay.
And then I think there are people who are like me, who approach it from a completely different perspective.
Okay.
That I write for it to be performed.
Okay.
So I don't write so that I think it looks good on the page. I write it so that I think it will sound and look good on stage when I do it.
Right.
And so for a number of years, I wouldn't even call myself a poet. I was just like, yeah, I'm an actress and a spoken word artist. And they'd be like, then you're a poet. And I'm like, no, I'm not a poet. I'm not as good as other people. I'm not a poet. I just perform stuff I write.
Gotcha.
It sounds like it has a flavor of a monologue to some degree, but it's very poetic.
Yeah.
He has an actor. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell a lot of stories in my work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of stories about people.
Now, if I'm correct, you're going to share a piece with us today. What are you going to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I'm going to share a new piece. I've only done it once, and it's something that was just, kind of on my heart. And I started to think about, the kind of people who were instrumental in our faith when we were, younger. I think about in the Bible that when something great happened, that, the Lord had a miracle, they built like a monument or something. And it was so that they would remember, that that's what God did. And, I started to think about those kinds of people that we have in our life that, we might not remember, we may not think about them, but there's always something about that person or something that sticks with you, and it affects you in your walk with God and your faith. And so, I wrote about someone who was that pillar for me that, we don't remember much about him. I remember his name, and I remember that he did the same thing every Sunday. And, it didn't make sense to me as a kid, but it makes a whole lot of sense to me now as an adult. And so I felt the need to write about that. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we have coming to the mic, Shaunte Caraballo. And what's the name of this piece?
This piece is called Deacon Jones.
Keep it locked, Raw Music Radio.
Every Sunday, Deacon Jones would move the "Do This in Remembrance of Me" table, place the offering on top, and begin to sing. I love the Lord, He heard my cry. And as they all had been trained to do, they replied, I, slowly, harmoniously, with precision like synchronicity. And I, in my crisply pressed church dress with ruffled socks and patent leather Mary Janes, mimicked the sounds I heard those in the congregation around me singing, not knowing what any of this meant. Every Sunday, he sang the same song over and over and over. Didn't he know any other songs? I mean, can we get another A or B selection from the choir, marching in, choreographed, clapping, praising, organ playing, sweat dripping, releasing the previous night's liquor binge sinning from its player's soul? Director hiding in the closet with his skeletons, trusting that Sunday's praise and worship session will help them forget that which should never be mentioned for fear of falling from perfection's graces. But there was Deacon Jones, singing the same old hymn every single Sunday. The gray kinks on his head telling, accentuating the notes. Youngsters fidget bored with such repetition, followed by pinches and cinnamon candy to keep quiet. We didn't understand, but every Sunday there he sang. In the face of criticism and the mother's bored, glaring eyes from underneath their pinned doilies and lap scarves at the Missionary Baptist Redeemer's Church on Mount Zion's blessed hill of the Holy Ghost-filled saints. They obliged the old man out of respect for the elders. They didn't know what he knew. But every Sunday, Deacon Jones ignored all of us and continued to sing the cry of his heart. You see, he knew other songs. He practiced them on Saturdays. He learned new songs from the choir, but every Sunday, something moved in him. And when he placed his hands on that table, the words written reached all the way back to his days of liquor binge, sinning, skeleton hiding, of his first, second, third, fourth, and 20th falls from perfection's graces. And he fell over and over and over, and all he could do was cry out, I can't do this no more. Now, I need help, and I love the Lord. He heard my cry. So every single Sunday he sang in remembrance. I love the Lord. He heard my cry. The Spirit within him would not let him forget. Every Sunday he remembered for himself and for us. And in the night when the darkness falls, and in the midst of my liquor binge sinning, I remembered his cries, the cries of the song I never knew, whose words I could not recite, but whose meanings were crucified into my soul with that table. And I cried out, and I reached up, and I was rescued, I was healed, and I know. I love the Lord. He heard my cry. Every Sunday, my heart cries out in remembrance of Deacon Jones. Because when I didn't know how to cry, he cried for me. For that little church, for this mother's board with their doilies, the choreographed choir, the sweat-dripping organist, and the closeted director. He cried out, and the Lord heard his cry.
2 snaps.
Thank you.
Whoa.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow.
Now, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that wasn't in Cali. That was in Mississippi.
It was actually in Cali.
What?
It could have been in New York. It could have been in New York.
So I'm like, That's a Mississippi moaning and groaning.
You know what? You know, my childhood pastor at the First Corinthian Missionary Baptist Church in Los Angeles, California, was from Mississippi, and he retired and moved back. So we had a little Mississippi Southern Baptist church in the heart of LA.
Wow.
Okay. Because I knew, being that you lived in both, that it had to be some Mississippi in that. But it's very interesting that was actually taking place in Cali.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Now, I know that you also work at Tennessee State University, and you work with a lot of students there who are also artists in their own right in terms of spoken word artists, even though it's the forensics team. Does being a spoken word artist, it all play a role in what you do at Tennessee State University?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the forensics team is the competitive speech and debate team, and, you know, they're always doing speeches and performances and interpretation of poetry, and, you know, these are some really amazing performers, and so, you know, it's great to be able to incorporate that into what they do and to have the experience of, you know, this is how we craft things for stage. This is how we craft things for an audience. And, you know, and it's not acting because, you know, they think of it as interpretation of literature because it's not theater, but they are performing poetry or short stories or, you know, collections of things that they've put together to make an argument. So, and they do it, and each one of them is 10 minutes long, and they have to hold an audience for that 10 minutes. And,
wow.
Man, that's tough to do, and they're amazing at it.
So let's talk about something very quickly, I guess. When you talked earlier, you talked about how your poetry or your spoken word is meant to be absorbed, I guess, live.
Right.
Or at least not necessarily on the page. Right. When you look at spoken word as a whole, or maybe even the places that you've been and the spoken word that you've been able to absorb, where do you feel like audiences register most? Or is there a difference between how people consume, for lack of a better term, consume the art form?
Yeah. You know, I think we as spoken word artists know that there's a variety of places you end up being. You know, my first slam was at a bar, you know, and they took up a collection in a pitcher, you know, that had some beer in it. So, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, and doing a piece, you know, far above rubies in a bar versus, you know, being able to do that at a women's, you know, conference and a women's ministry has been, you know, it's very different, but I find that the message is received the same. Yeah. That there's always somebody who, you know, comes up afterward, regardless of if it's a bar or a church, and they're like, you know, I needed to hear that. Like, that just spoke to me. And, you know, I think about it that it's the idea that God reaches us where we are. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if, you know, you've been running from church and somebody brought the word to the bar. Exactly. God is going to touch you where you at. And, you know, it will happen. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I loved your piece because so much of the imagery that you presented, I connected with, especially the dresses and the shoes and the choir. It's just very vivid, and it jumped off the page for me, even though obviously we're, you know, in a studio and you're not on a stage. But that was dope. I liked it a lot, and I just wanted to publicly say that because I know we kind of went from the piece. Diallo will take us around the world sometimes. We went on his private jet real quick, interviewing Jet.
I didn't know she had Patti LaBelle living inside of her. Did she sing the song?
You know,
or
it's funny. I'm not a singer, but you know, I think it's funny because I think everybody who went to a small Baptist church probably had that wooden table that says "Do this in remembrance of me." They still
have those tables.
You know, and it's the table.
We've gotten the ROI off of those tables probably about 1,000 times.
Exactly, right? Everybody has one of those tables there for offering and communion. And, you know, only the deacons get to touch it, and so you know, with that, I think that is just something an experience that we all have. And, you know, I always laugh about this song. Right. It's that song. And to be honest, I don't know the rest of the words to that song. They're written down somewhere, but everybody I talk to nobody knows the words to that song. Right. But a lot of people remember it from church because somebody in their church sang that song.
So they still sing it at my church in Mississippi, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly, yeah.
What are the rest of the words?
I love the Lord, He heard my cry and pitied every groan. Long as I live and trouble rise.
Can you sing it to the melody?
I can keep going if you want me.
Wait. Can you sing it to the melody?
No, that Shaunte did a wonderful job. And I wanted to talk about her interview. And Shaunte, one of the things you mentioned was about, to me, and I don't know if we have time to really go into it, but how you used to go minister at strip clubs.
Yes, you know,
in California.
I'll say that, you know, a wonderful friend of mine, my friend Harmony, has she used to be in the sex industry, and she just had this idea that when she left, you know, that God wouldn't reach her because she was dirty, kind of like, you know, God doesn't love you, you can't go to church. And she went to church, and our church didn't give her that at all. They just loved her and accepted her for who she was, and said that, you know, God will change your heart. It's not our responsibility to do that. So she was driving back by the old strip club she used to work at, and she just felt compelled to write notes on the cars of the women who were there to tell them how much they were loved. And then that went further, and she thought, well, I should just leave them little gifts. And, you know, she had this idea and went to talk to one of our pastors, and he said, that's your ministry, that's your calling.
Sure.
And she's turned it into a ministry. And so, you know, they do these wonderful pink bags, you know, quarterly. We do these hot pink bags and put lots of gifts and, you know, makeup and jewelry, and we write handwritten notes, and we go to strip clubs and deliver them to the women. And, you know, it's not about, we don't preach to them. We don't, you know, tell them, you know, they need to leave. We just love them and give them gifts and tell them how valuable they are, and that God loves them and that they're treasured. And that, you know, God changes so many of their hearts that it's been a wonderful, wonderful, you know, ministry to be a part of. And I just am blessed to be able to do that and to see those women, you know, come full circle and see the women who actually leave the industry and then are now a part of the ministry. So
right.
Yeah, it's awesome.
The couple of things that jumped out to me in what you were saying is that regardless of what direction your past is, I think everyone struggles with that concept of condemnation. And then when you multiply it by the fact that you do something that maybe isn't socially acceptable, and it could depend on what social circle you come from, because for some people it could be, oh, I smoked cigarettes, or I, you know, went to jail, or whatever the struggle is. It's just whatever your social confines are. If you do something that is not socially acceptable, you kind of almost debase yourself inside of your own person. Exactly. It's not necessarily people actively coming against you. And I think about the scripture that says that God didn't send his son into the world to condemn the world or to judge the world, but to save the world through him. And God is simply love. And that for me is fantastic, because it's like really the gospel in action.
Absolutely.
Like you said, I mean, and yes, I mean, there are some people who plant the seed, some people who water the seed. And when you say, hey, we're not necessarily going to preach them, we're not necessarily going to actively convert them right in that moment. It's like for some of those people, you planted a seed. Exactly. And for other people, you watered the seed that was already planted and provided an opportunity to showcase the gospel through a live and living person. Exactly. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Without judgment, you know, and it's something that we all understand, because regardless of what you've done in your past, we all have this idea that we're just not good enough.
Right.
And, you know, and the truth is we're not, right? We're not good enough, which is why we need
earned.
Exactly.
Right. Earned what hell was waiting for us, and then he saved us. Yeah.
Exactly. We're all imperfect, and we all need a savior, and thank God he sent one. So
yes. Yeah. Because my blood wouldn't have worked.
Exactly. I'm with you.
Well, we really appreciate you spending today with us and just kind of sharing not only the peace, but your heart and the ministry that God has given you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. How can people stay in touch with you? Where are you at? What are you doing? Or where can they find you?
Yeah, I am. I'm a professor at TSU, so I spend most of my time on campus with the kids there. But you can follow me. I'm on Instagram, and it's Caraballo SR. That's ridiculous. Caraballo SR. And I'm also on Twitter with the same hashtag, same thing. And, you know, I keep in touch with folks. I post new pieces. I'm always putting out inspiration, sharing with things. You know, I really have a heart for single women. So I'm always talking about, you know, the journey of being a single woman who loves Jesus.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
Yep. I said we're definitely looking forward to your project this summer, Shaunte. We want to be one of the first ones to get that on the air, so definitely shoot us some tracks whenever they're ready, and we want to put it out into the world, because there are souls that will be reached and blessed, I'm sure, by the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Y'all be the first ones to get a copy.
Yes, I'm excited. So, guys, you've been listening to Rhythm and Word Raw Music Radio on 760 The Gospel. You know how we do every week. We thank you, Shaunte, for coming in here. Guys, until next week, you know how we do. Be progressive, be creative, but ultimately, be you.
Thank you for listening. Tune in and log on next week for another edition of Rhythm and Word Raw Music Radio Show, where ink meets beat.